Yeah, what's up, peeps? How you doing? Well, so it's been a little while since I've done a video, and I figured I've got quite a few things to talk about, which I think are worth bringing to the table, at least as far as going your own way is concerned. And it's that situation that that empathy, you know, because I think what I think a lot of guys don't quite understand is air quotes wrong with them. Well, there's nothing really wrong with them, but I will go on to describe what is wrong with it, and that is the that driven nature that most men have to be protector providers. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about Captain Save-A-Ho type protector, nor am I referring to the sort of beta male in terms of provider. You know, both these traits, no matter how you look at them, they're alpha male, whether you like it or not. And if you're one of these men going your own way that want to argue that one, well, throw it in the comments and I'll either do a video or we can have a back and forth there, whichever. But you see, the reality of that, just to talk about that ever so quick, is the very same people that will say, oh yeah, well, beta provider, blah, blah, blah. The truth is, it's like both these traits are male, you know, they're both male traits, right? I'm not talking about being a beta, of course. I'm talking about like protector provider, you know. But that is our primary drive as men, you know. As I mean, sure, probably not so much in our younger years, when, you know, sort of like what, early teens or something like that. I'll say early teens, I mean mid-teens. You know what I mean, right? But again, you know, it's that when your hormones are completely fucked, for want of a better term, and you definitely ain't thinking with your big head, right? But this is what I've definitely noticed as we get older. Now, sure, there are a lot of people out there, both male and female, who just want to play the field, not have any, not have one particular partner for a long-term relationship, as they were perhaps once known to be better, being better. And of course, the other problem with all this is, you know, you call it hypergamy. It's just that there's a lot of choices out there. That's the truth. And the same that is applied to women applies to men. But some guys don't like to acknowledge that. Maybe they've got low self-esteem. The reality, however, is that if you're in a relationship with someone, you have just as much opportunity to cheat on that spouse or that partner or whatever as much as they have on you. Then it comes down to a case of, you could argue for morals. And I'm not going to get too involved in the whole nitty gritty, but let's face it, as I've said before, if needs are not being met within a relationship, either individual is going to find another way to have their needs met. I'm obviously not glorifying people that cheat or anything like that. I wouldn't do that. I think it's morally wrong. You know, these things should be talked about, and then if you can't come to an agreement, then obviously, in my opinion at least, the best thing to do is to just end that relationship, go your own separate ways, and try and find someone that's a bit more compatible. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. But there's no point in beating around the bush on that one. I'm going off the topic of being a protector and being a provider. Now, even from my own personal experiences, some of which I've spoken about on the channel, again, these are all videos that I've now made private. But one of the sort of things that really kind of agged me in the not understanding, like what was why didn't I pick these things out? Why didn't I recognise them? Well, I mean, obviously rose tinted glasses was obviously a thing. But with that, it's like when I see the relationship I'm talking about one particular relationship, because when I look at it for what it was, it was very superficial. And even though, on the sort of ground level it was very superficial, I still thought, and air quotes, felt, that I was doing the right thing by standing by that particular individual, recognising that there was an issue with that individual, and, doing that thing that what partners are supposed to do in those kind of circumstances, in standing by them and supporting them. Right? It's always been a strength and a weakness, at least for me. It's a strength because it's a good moral thing to do, but it's a weakness because for those that are able to manipulate, it can kind of get used against you, sort of thing. Not necessarily in a negative term in that kind of aspect, but people can definitely take the piss out of your good nature, and that obviously leaves a bit of taste in your mouth later on down the line, and then it's sort of like, well, why am I bothering with all this shit, right? Yeah, MGTOW. That's pretty much how it fucking panned out for me. But still, it didn't take away that voluntary and reactionary motion of still wanting to stand by, we're talking about a situation that, I was not quite fully aware of the bigger picture. Wasn't quite sure what was going on in all the in sort of background, as it were. But whatever, it doesn't matter. My point being is, whereas I had a high level of empathy, and I felt like almost like a level of responsibility for that other person, and whereas recognising that they had issues of their own, that, if truth be told, I don't think some of these people can work through their issues on their own. It just causes further problems for them further on down the line. However, these type of people can seem to be quite dismissive and quite discarding of help that may come their way, because they don't recognise that they have an issue in the first place. The problem is everyone else, right? That being said, in some aspects it kind of can be the case. Not necessarily everyone, but depends on the people that you surround yourself with. But a lot of the time, for these people, there's no accountability, there's no responsibility, there's, that their actions were, although they were their actions, it was someone else's fault, and it's obviously it wasn't, but whatever. And that's just kind of like the general consensus of an irresponsible and, I could go as far as saying cluster B, but, just because someone is irresponsible and doesn't accept accountability when they do screw something up doesn't necessarily make them cluster B. It just means that they're not accepting responsibility where they should. But I'm not going to get too involved in all of that right now. But getting back on the kind of main course, and it's like, well, the majority of guys, I would argue, regardless of whether you're going your own way or whether you want to define yourself as being purple-pilled or something like that, whatever, you can still technically be, air quotes, red-pilled, and then just still do relationships if that's what you want to do, and it's no one else's business but your own, really. I've said that before. But the point being is the kind of issues, like I said, that a lot of guys, I think, do have, and that is that they feel that they are personally responsible for their partner, especially if they have a whole bunch of issues going on, and it's whether they're psychological or something like that. It's a thing, you know, and so that in itself can make it difficult to walk away from a relationship that has an individual with these issues. The main differences being, and this is where I think a lot of guys falter, and it's just is what it is. I think it's just male nature, to be honest. But I think the place where a lot of guys falter is where, or at least maybe it's the moral men, right? I just want to put that out there. It's probably the more moral men, those that have an actual conscience, they have a high level of responsibility, especially where there's someone else involved where they can see there are potential issues and they can see these individuals are particularly self-destructive. Not necessarily in the sense of self-harming, but rather acting rather than thinking things, you know, about consequences of their actions or what they say or what they do and so on. So I think a lot of these guys take on, you know, this is something that even I've done. You take on that, it's not a higher moral ground really, but you take on the responsibility over someone else even though you really have no authority over their life and how they live it. Because as soon as stuff doesn't go their way, you know, they can potentially flip it and blame it on the other person or whatever other outside sources going on at the time. So this leaves the guys with issues, you know, whereas like I said, they stay in relationships a lot longer, they try and make relationships work. I mean, sometimes, right, there are exceptions to this, of course. I'm just kind of putting this one out there for the sake of, you know, trying to open people's eyes up to potential situations that at least I have found myself in the past. And then, you know, you end up staying in something longer than what you really should do. And rather than doing what is the right thing by yourself, you try and do what you think is perhaps societally right or maybe morally right for yourself in some aspect. And you try and look after someone who, at the end of the day, really doesn't appreciate what you're doing for them. I mean, sure, they may do it there and then at the time. But as time progresses, you know, these things may well diminish, and then, you know, you find yourself perhaps in a heated argument where, you know, you didn't take the trash out this day or whatever. And you're thinking, well, that was 3-4 years ago, whatever. It doesn't matter, you know. Insert bullshit here, right? And then as a result of all that, you know, the heated argument, it's you end up going your separate ways. Now, this is, I think, what devastates guys most. Now, I'm talking about the sort of good, honest men. This is what devastates them the most, is they put their time, their effort, their finance and, you know, their heart and soul into something. Usually a relationship. And so they become very, I guess, narrow focused on it. You know, because they want it to work. Or they don't want this person to be making silly decisions, even though that they've probably got a thing for making silly decisions, whatever it is, you know. And they stay in these relationships hoping that they can change something, whereas at the end of the day, you know, the other person ain't going to change, they ain't going to change. If they can't acknowledge that their behaviour is a little bit wrong or something like that, maybe a bit out of order or whatever, uncouth, whatever, then yeah, it's going to cause a problem for the guy when that breakup does come. And like I said before, I do think women, when they do stay in relationships a lot longer than what they should do, the guy's usually devastated because the woman don't love them no more. And they hadn't loved them for quite a while. They were kind of hoping that maybe through a means of dropping hints, or sometimes just flat out saying it how it is, that the guy would use their incentive and initiative and their air quotes alpha charge, as it were, and walk out themselves. But unfortunately that's not necessarily what happens. And what can happen is, you know, the women find themselves another partner, and so they've kind of got one lined up. This is something that we do talk about as well. So they got themselves another guy lined up, ready for when the shit hits the fan. Now, you could argue that it's a shitty thing to do, and I'd probably agree with you, to be fair. And I would, it is a shitty thing to do. But if we're looking at this from like a survival instinct, like if we go back to our very core basics, like I say, guys becoming, or sorry, not becoming, but being the protector providers, then in that aspect, whereas I don't agree with it, the women that do that, and guys do it as well, to be fair, you know, they have affairs and whatnot, and they've got their little bit on the side or whatever. So they're waiting for the next time that the other half blows up, starts an argument, so that they can just be like, right, I'm fucking done, get the shit and go. This is what I mean. It's a very two-sided thing, which is why I've been having a bit of issue with the whole men going their own way thing at the moment, and like I say, I've been seeing things that have been going on outside in the real world. Granted, a lot of it is over here in the UK rather than what happens in the US. You know, there are definitely differences between how things are run here and there, but I'm not going to get too into that. But my point being in all of this, I think the major devastation for the sort of like good guy that really didn't see it coming, and again, it's hard to define in this day and age what a good guy actually is. In the same that it's hard to define what a good girl actually is. I'd like to think that a good girl is a girl that looks after, or a woman that looks after their man, takes care of his needs and all of that. And, you know, I'd argue the same for the guy. You know, it's that shit's got to be reciprocal. But I think a lot of the time it isn't, and people just don't want to see it. But that's just one of them things. But like I say, I think this is been the main affecting, devastating factor. What screws guys over, you know, it's sort of like how they end up going down these psychological pathways of, you know, potentially going their own way. Now, I'm not criticising any guy that goes MGTOW or whatever. I'm not criticising them in the slightest. It's a very wise choice, especially in the US, given the whole Me Too and just the attitudes that women tend to have towards men by today's standards. It's just like, as the saying goes, what have you done for me lately? You know, and that's one that, yeah, it does come up. Let's face it, let's be real. It does come up in conversations with, or I say conversations, usually arguments or the beginning of an argument. And that's the point. It's like people have become too used to the other person becoming some kind of commodity or useful tool, you know, a means to an end or something like that, rather than being more on a personal level. You know, it's because all of that, I think, has been taught out of people. You know, that's why there's so many dysfunctional societies, you know, out there. You know, or not even societies, just dysfunctional people. You know, but anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about in this one. I'll be curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. So, as always, leave your thoughts, comments, and opinions in the comment section. And until the next one, stay cool, stay free, and peace out.